Hi guys, today I'm going to be reviewing The Last Days of American Crime. This just came out on June 5th on Netflix. It is a crime action thriller. It is 2 hours and 28 minutes. This is directed by Olivier Megaton, who kind of comes from the Luc Besson tree, if it were. He taken over for Taken 2 and Taken 3 and also The Transporter. So he's no slouch to making these large, big crime action thrillers. It's also important to point out that Sebastian Inizan was the production designer for also Taken 2 and Taken 3, and he does a really phenomenal job on this film as well. This film is kind of a high concept thriller. It starts off with this premise that in the not so distant future, there is a technology in the United States called an API, American Peace Initiative, that will stop criminals from being able to commit crimes with this signal going on. So all crime is going to be abolished. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Minority Report. It's important to point out that this is based on the graphic novel The Last Days of American Crime by Rick Remender. And so much of this film is about this kind of visual world. It's so much style over substance. And for 2 hours and 28 minutes, I just tend to think that that was kind of a bit of a recipe for not so much success to have a film this long without enough substance to really make it worthwhile. So going into this, we are introduced to Graham Brick, who is kind of like the last great bank robber in this, this kind of Sin City-like world that we have here, with this very Americana. Really the world building in this is pretty cool. So if you're into Neo Noir, this is a really good example of Neo Noir in terms of style. It even has some of the other kind of elements of it with like the voiceover. So his character is introduced to Anna Brewster's Shelby Dupree, who ends up having this kind of voiceover, which later on it kind of stops having a voiceover, which was a little strange that they introduced that and not used it. But she is obviously this femme fatale, even with the voiceover kind of talking about how they're meeting and how it's going to be trouble for his character. And then also Michael Pitt is kind of the third in what becomes this trio of this heist that is going to make the last crime before the API signal gets into play. This is really an interesting film because so many good parts, and yet the whole of it, the story, to me really falls apart. I think that the acting overall, I think these actors were doing as pretty good a job as they could. I think that the writing just kind of left them short. And when it's, when these films are referenced in a graphic novel, you kind of have these one-liners, and so much of the writing, the translating in the screenplay, just turns into these cliched one-liners, and this that tone of the graphic novel comes right through in the film, but it's not given enough other story to really make it worth the 2 hours and 28 minutes. I couldn't figure out if this film was actually planned for a theatrical release and then Corona just made it only released in theaters. It is, pegged as the Netflix film, which can mean a lot of different things. There can be a lot of different production companies that are making Netflix films. But I really wonder how much this could have also been a series. There's another series that was on HBO called Reprisal, which is also dripping in this neo-noir aesthetic. Actually has some of the same pitfalls of being style over substance, but it does make me think that this 2 hours and 28 minutes, it should have either been a shorter film or it should have been a series, because they could have stretched it out to 4 hours with longer dialogue and more of the world building and all of those kind of interesting elements to it. So overall, I'm going to give this movie a D because it has to have a good story to make it worth 2 hours and 28 minutes. And I'm really trying to recommend people to not waste their times with things. So unless you really like the aesthetic, or you're like super into production design, or kind of like this world building, it's really not, it doesn't really work together. The plot falls apart in a lot of different ways, a lot of good elements, but ultimately just pretty unsatisfying, despite all of the cool pieces. So that's my review for The Last Days of American Crime. I'm going to be coming with some more reviews really soon, so I'll talk to you guys later.